Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Diana, and I am the Global Blockchain Business Council's Head of Research and Sustainability. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to the GBBC's Virtual Members Forum on Building the Future of the Metaverse Superapp. We're a bi-weekly webinar showcasing the innovative work of our members around the world. And today we are joined by Idan Zuckerman, co-founder and CEO at Upland. The metaverse is an immersive layer of the internet. This does not mean waiting for VR technology to catch up, but building visual, social, and economic immersive ecosystems with the current massively adoptive technologies. The Metaverse Superapp will be a foundation for the experiences and apps that we use to manage our digital lives. From an open digital economy based on true ownership to a social layer of avatar interactions, the future platforms for users and brands will be metaverse apps. While many siloed metaspaces are now being built, the metaverse itself will be dominated by SuperApps that provide the context, ecosystem, and economic foundations for all these metaspaces to connect to. Upland is the largest Web3 metaverse mapped to the real world, with the largest number of unique landowners. Upland's users are pioneers in the metaverse economy and use the platform to trade, create, open businesses, find entertainment, socialize, and build communities. We welcome your questions at any point during today's presentation, so please submit them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can take them after the presentation. Thank you, Idan, for joining us, and I will hand things over to you to begin.
All right, thanks Diana for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. So again, my name is Idan Zuckerman. I'm co-founder and co-CEO of Upland. I'm going to be speaking a bit today about our journey from going from a property trading game to a Metaverse super app. So again, a bit about Upland. Upland is probably today's biggest Web3 metaverse by many parameters, which I'll show some examples. And our mission basically is to elevate your digital life. That's the long-term mission, and we are big believers, and we're not the only one, that the web, the way that we experience the digital internet, is going to transform from kind of like what we call the scrolling use case to the strolling use case. So if up until in the past 10-20 years we've been kind of like scrolling social media, looking for content, interacting with people, we're going to slowly move to a more immersive way of doing so. And it's just like easy to just look at our kids, right? The way they interact today with their friends, the way they socialize, have fun together, usually is done through immersive games and immersive metaverses. And we aim to be at the core of that future way that the immersive web will shape up. And we're also obviously huge believers that the future of the immersive web is going to be powered by true ownership and it's going to be completely open and decentralized to many extents. So a bit about Upland. It's the largest metaverse mapped to the real world today. We launched very early on. It was 2020, just where way before NFTs was a word that everybody knew. And we launched on mobile. So we are a mobile-first platform, but we are also cross-platform. We have only over 3 million registered users, over 300,000 unique landowners. And to date, again, since this is an open economy based on true ownership, our players have realized over $10 million in USD, basically interacting and transacting with each other and extracting value out of the ecosystem. Important to say that in Upland, you don't earn just by speculation. Again, this is not the point. It's not easy to speculate in Upland on assets. It's kind of like even the currency, right? The Apex, it's not tradable outside of Upland. The way that you extract value in Upland towards and realize it toward real world value is by selling any of your NFTs directly to other players. And when you do that, you can do that either for US dollars or for or for our virtual currency, which is called Apex. So usually, if you're really good at creating value in Upland, it's going to be about how did you, develop together with the community your properties, and maybe that's the way you increase their value. Or how did you create new types of NFTs like outdoor decor or cars or carts or stuff like that? And you literally have the opportunity to become an entrepreneur in the metaverse and not just speculate on digital assets.
You've seen the llama, you've seen the hype, you've seen Upland, and now it's time to jump in. So what is Upland? Upland is a platform powering the entrepreneurial community in the open metaverse. Upland is the metaverse that is fast becoming the central hub for players to build their digital life. Technology is changing the way we interact with each other, the things we do online, the economy. Technology is changing it all, and Upland is at the forefront of that change. The Upland platform is a new land of opportunity, creativity, and diversity. Upland empowers players to pursue their passions and build their lives and businesses, all with true ownership. In Upland, anyone can buy, invest in, or flip virtual real estate. Players can collect and sell sports memorabilia from their favorite athletes. They can build their dream house or a factory and create a business with Upland Meta Ventures. Players are also able to own, drive, sell, and race the car of their dreams. They can explore games and experiences that use Upland as a discovery gateway and connect to its economy. They can collect, sell, and show off artwork and other NFTs, and so much more. In Upland, we really are building the open metaverse economy and rebuilding the world block by block, and we're doing it with creators and players like you.
Okay, so a small snippet about what Upland is. So again, we started our journey again. We always knew, even from the earliest days, that we are going to be this huge metaverse platform with an open economy where you can become an entrepreneur. But we started out very small as a property trading game. And the basic kind of like core experience loops you had in Upland was about buying properties. There were some gamification loops like, putting your properties into collections. So whatever, collect 3 properties in the same street, collect 3 museums in San Francisco, et cetera, et cetera. There were some other small elements like treasure hunting, where you kind of like go and chase treasures around the map, et cetera. But then slowly we started adding more and more layers on top of it. And at the same time, also opening it up as a platform. So there are a lot of ways that people today engage in Upland, again, and there are a lot of ways of NFTs and some of them are also kind of like today tied to brand partnerships that we run. So for example, Upland has a lot of different types of NFTs. Actually, every digital item in the Upland economy is an NFT. It's always born and stays as an NFT, or either a fungible token. So also the currencies Apex and Spark that we use in the game, there are also fungible tokens on the blockchain. So it's not that you enjoy true ownership only when you export your items into, let's say, OpenSea. Every item is born kind of like a truly owned item and is notarized on the blockchain. And some of the ways that we also engage with brands in the metaverse is through our different NFTs and events. So things like collections that we had with our partnership with the FIFA World Cup, the Men's World Cup last year, and also the Women's World Cup coming up this year. Different types of cars. So we just announced our partnership with Stock Car Pro Series, which is the Brazilian NASCAR. So we're going to have branded cars, races happening throughout Upland, etc. We have outdoor decor, which are basically map assets, things that either users can create or we create together with brand partners. One example was our collaboration with UNICEF, where we created these kind of like UNICEF branded garden gnomes as means to raise charity. So UNICEF can invest back in other privileged communities in Brazil to kind of like get educated about the metaverse. It was a really cool project. And then things like, our partnerships with the NFL Player Association, where we create player branded memorabilia from NFL games, including kind of like jerseys and caps. And these are also wearables that you can wear on your avatar. So a lot of ways where kind of like opportunities to also interact with real world brands. And the way that Uplanders engage today in the metaverse, again, there's a lot of different things that you could do. And then given also with our extensibility with our developer platform, which I'll talk about in a second, there are now a lot of different types of experiences that you can play in Upland. And one example is World of Football, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with a game called Rocket League, probably a lot of you are. So this is kind of like a Rocket League style soccer game where you could play 3 against 3 or 5 against 5 live football. And the way that it's in Upland, you can actually go to your local neighborhood soccer pitch, take the pitch, and then play against other players in an experience that is then outside of Upland. We've recently introduced ways for you to communicate with each other within the app. So we're slowly even moving all of the Discord interactions that happened up until now outside of Upland into Upland, and that way you can engage either with your local communities or directly with other players via DMs through our app. You can construct buildings and develop your neighborhoods. A lot of again, obviously, race cars in Upland, which is one of the more exciting parts that our players are happy about. Again, today, you can actually take your car in Upland, get immersed in full 3D through an external app, and then race and compete against either your friends or in actual real world, like real branded competition, like Stock Car Pro Series. And actually, you race through the streets of Upland, and you see Upland around you as it develops and changes through time. And then again, continuing on the theme of starting as a property trading game, but then progressing for what now we call a super app, because we see Upland is not a game at the end of the day. I mean, it does have a lot of internal gamification loops, but Upland is basically the layer of the metaverse that gives you a context, and then where you can branch out to different types of experiences and games. This can be games, this can be services. And the way that we do it, there's a small cute animation right here.
Hey everybody, this is Thank Me Later, and I am a...
Before I let Thank Me Later do the talking, this is done through what we call our third-party developer platform. So this is something very, very, very crucial and pivotal that we launched into beta last year. And this basically opens up Upland to any developer or company that has any kind of offering to basically connect their offering into Upland. Now, when you think about it, most of the platforms that allow you to do that, if you think about, let's say, Roblox or, they would allow you to develop for that ecosystem, meaning that you have to design a game that looks like Roblox, behaves like Roblox, and then eventually integrates directly into Roblox. In Upland, we took a bit of a different approach, and kind of like in the spirit of keeping everything open. So we're actually agnostic of the client tools that you use. So you can have a mobile game, or you can have a Unity or Unreal desktop game, like World of Football here. You can have a website or a service. It doesn't matter what you have. What we allow you to connect to is in the backend to our entire identity system, economic infrastructure, players' assets, land, and metaverse. And then we allow you to actually take any offering that you have. It can be a Web 2 offering, it can be a Web 3 offering, but then enhance it with all of the Web 3 offerings that Upland have to offer, which includes, NFTs, the liquidity of the user, the spaces. So imagine for a second, if you are a Web 2 game and you don't have the concept of land, right? Why would you want to create it on your own? Upland gives you the opportunity to come take a piece of land. You can take over an entire neighborhood if you wanted to, make it your own. You truly own it, because we're talking about true ownership. And now this can become the land foundation for your Web 2 offering. I'll give you a couple of examples of from our third-party developers. These were some of the early ones that launched. By now today, we have six that are in production and dozens of more coming.
A member of the Upland Developer Network. UpX World is a digital projection of the Upland metaverse. In this world, we are going to be creating a lot of 3D interactions and experiences, leveraging what we call our Xlander, which is our avatar. So our Xlander, you can see, has the opportunity to interact in this world in a completely new and unique way, which we're hoping to extend different games and utilities for Upland players across the board. As we continue to build out this layer 2, we are exploring with different mechanics such as flight Early on in the project, there was a lot of anticipation with creating jetpacks for the Xlander, and the community had some designs, and so we always wanted to maybe include that, and we've actually had the opportunity to start integrating that in, and you can see here being able to now fly around the Upland space. So we're very excited about that. So the Upland Development Network is going to change everything for Upland, because all of the gamification and utility that we've been dreaming of is now in the hands of the community. And I've had the privilege to see how talented that community is. That's the game changer. Is we're now empowered as a community to really create the future of Upland. 90% of the development effort so far for UpX World has come from fellow Uplanders. You can visit upx.world and you will be guided to our Discord, where most of the community is happening right now. Discord.gg/upxworld. This is TML signing off for the Upland Developer Network. Super excited to be a part of the future of what we're building as a community.
So again, you can start imagining basically how the concept of the super app takes shape, right? So again, we're all probably familiar with the Web3 space, with NFT projects, right? There's always the question of, okay, so I have these NFTs now. What do I do with them, right? Other than just speculate on them. And again, this mindset allows you to basically take not just NFTs, but any digital property that is a part of a metaverse ecosystem. And now if you're an entrepreneur, right, it's not just about the NFTs. You can complement them quite easily with experiences or utility or any value proposition that you develop. And the cool thing about our third-party programming tools is that all you need to do is you need to know how to develop for APIs. So we've taken all the complexities of working with NFTs, minting them, transacting with them, and we've obfuscated them and made it very, very simple, both to users. So when you onboard into Upland, all you need to do is actually install the app and sign in with a user and a password. But also to developers. So now if you want to, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to create an NFT project and base it on the Upland platform, if you want to even give further utility for those NFTs, all you need to do is know how to program for APIs. So now, instead of just a community of maybe thousands of developers that know how to code to blockchain, now you're expanded your developer market potentially to hundreds of thousands of developers that know how to program for APIs. Yeah, so again, just a bit of a visualization of what kind of services can a super app provide to our consumers. So obviously entertainment and games, and these are games that it's no longer up to us as Upland to provide, just for us to provide the fun element of the metaverse and the gamification. Now, basically any player, any developer, any entrepreneur can now create new types of interactions and gamifications with a Web3 mindset for the metaverse. It's social communication layer, right? So we've started out with, let's call it 2D communication, kind of like direct messaging and group messaging in the app. But now we're actually going to launch very, very, very soon immersive interaction. So now imagine now that Upland becomes this kind of like an ecosystem where you can have your community, your virtual community can have both land, but also Discord-like communication, but then also an immersive extension when you can meet together in full 3D with your avatars, with your wearables, and actually have a social immersion type of an experience as opposed to just like 2D communication. Obviously, digital and physical commerce, these are things that are already live in Upland. Today, all of the secondary markets in Upland appear as actual virtual shops, right? So if you're an Uplander, you can open either a showroom for cars or a place where you can trade FIFA branded, what we call legits. Or you can create a factory and start manufacturing things in Upland. It's about mobility, right? So again, in Upland, one thing very unique about Upland is that when you want to travel between places, you actually need to take a plane or you need to take a train or a bus. And this opens up the whole possibility of transportation, right? So cars in Upland are not just collectibles. They actually have utility where you can utilize them to drive between different cities, or even take passengers with you and cargo in the future. And then also you can race them and have fun with other players throughout the streets of Upland. Again, education, land, work, financial services, right? Some of the third-party developer tools that we've seen connect to Upland were entrepreneurs that actually started to make these exchanges for resources in Upland, and then that's the way that they can generate income for themselves in form of Apex. So all of these things are basically served through this Metaverse Superapp that is Upland. So again, we can't have a presentation in 2023 without kind of like ignoring the elephant in the room and kind of like the entire, Web3 downturn. And again, we sit in Upland. Obviously, 2022 was a huge year with huge hype. And we see it basically as 2023 we are basically regressing back to the normal evolution of the industry. I think our economy is still thriving, and you can see it with a lot of activities. So today in Upland, you have probably an average of between 35 and 50,000 daily active users, which makes it probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Web3 platforms. And also in Upland, we highly believe that in the high 90s%, these are actually humans. So there's no incentives really for you to be multi-accounting or botting in Upland. So our users are actually active humans. And when we throughout 2023, still when we do new city releases, the latest one was London. They're going really, really well. Huge interactions, a lot of demand. Whenever we do car sales in Upland, they run out before they even get to the open queue. All of our partnerships that we've done, especially examples like the FIFA World Cup, went really, really well. And then also we have some future partnerships coming up with, for example, Stock Car Pro Series. We expect them to go really well as well. So at the end of the day, again, our economy is very stable. It's thriving. And yes, obviously there is some kind of like a different in terms of like compared to the hype phases of 2022, but we are back to actually building, developing, making the platform better, and then growing it linearly and sustainably, right? As opposed to kind of like based on any type of hype. Some of the brands that we've been able to incorporate, and again, part of the reason why we're successful in recruiting these brands to partner up with Upland is the fact that it's actually mapped to the real world. So it's really intuitive for brands. So if you take a partner, for example, like the NFL Player Association, right? We recreated NFL-style stadiums in Upland, and it's really intuitive for the player and also the brand to know, okay, if I need to go to buy, I'm a San Francisco 49ers fan and I want to kind of like buy some merch, then it's very intuitive for me that I go literally in Upland to the stadium in Santa Clara where I have the fan shop. So these types of kind of like cognitive alignment between both the brand and the consumer through the mapping of the digital world is something that helps us a lot with kind of like partnering up with brand partners. And then again, another thing that kind of like I think was very instrumental in our ability to actually scale to a point, to a leadership position. It's about the accessibility and having Upland available actually for the mass market. So like I said before, Upland is available today on mobile devices. I think it's one of the only, if not the only, Web3 platforms that are available to download on the iOS App Store and Google Play. But you could also play it from your desktop and through either mobile web or desktop web. And part of the reason is kind of like we are, as opposed to a lot of other projects in the industry, we kind of like, we don't ignore regulation in the US. We actually try to kind of like be regulatory compliant so we can have this mass market appeal, but also find ways how we can actually create ecosystems that will evolve together with regulation. We know it's a painful process to comply with regulation, but we believe that by actually making our offering safely available for players, also in the US, then that would help to grow the ecosystem to a much larger scale. And one of the very, let's call it mass market, capabilities that we have is when we comply with regulation, it gives the option, for example, for players to do things like sell their NFTs directly for US dollars, right? This is not, so again, whereas for Web3 native crypto aficionados, it may not be a prerequisite. They may actually prefer to interact with ETH, or, they know how to pay gas fees. When you talk about the mass markets, the other 90% of the population, right? They think in fiat, they want to act in fiat. And when they sell something to another player, they want to have the proceeds available for them directly in US dollars. So this is some of the things that being regulatory compliant allows you to do within the US and then also outside in the rest of the world. This allows for a much easier way to grow and scale your ecosystem. So a couple of data points. Again, 65% of Uplanders don't own NFTs outside of Upland, right? So you start seeing like that the Upland community is not kind of like the usual Web3 community that is highly intersected with other projects. We do actually have some of our own recruited players that, a lot of players that come to Upland are actually just gamers that are discovering the game. And even through Upland, they discover what it means to have true ownership, what kind of value proposition it gives to the consumer. And through there, they discover even the word and the concept of NFTs, etc. And again, we are mobile first. Again, we truly strongly believe that, in today's world, and, everybody's talking about VR, and when everybody imagines the metaverse, you kind of like instinctively imagine that VR experience. And even, Apple is now going to launch their VR headset probably in the next week or so, which is really exciting. But we need to understand that these are processes that are going to take probably years and maybe decades to get to a point where these wearable devices are going to be lightweight. They're not going to create you nausea, and you're actually going to be able to use them for long durations of time. Until that point, the way that most humans interface with the digital world is through their mobile devices. And Upland has a very unique proposition where, again, if you want to check a message because somebody pinged you in Upland, if you want to approve a transaction because somebody offered to buy your car for a certain amount of money, you don't need to wait to be at your desktop to interact with the world. The interaction point of your world is at the palm of your hand in Upland. But it doesn't end there, because of our open platform, you can then expand and extend your experiences through other more high fidelity platforms when you are near your computer. A good example for that is the game I showed you, World of Football, the soccer game, right? Which does require a desktop game, right? So if somebody, for example, invited me to a tournament in World of Football, I can accept it on my mobile device because I'm currently out for gas or something. But then when I'm back, when it's time to play the tournament, I can actually sit down, open my desktop, and then launch the World of Football game and play it in the context of Upland. So we think it's a hugely important and crucial evolution of open ecosystems as they become more and more present. Again, just a couple of numbers just to show how we compare with our scale to the rest of the Web3 metaverse industries. Again, we have more than 5 million NFTs sold, and the big part of it is basically the amount of unique landowners and active players that play the game. And if you compare it to other popular Web3 platforms, again, the scale is just so much bigger, but then it's also a much more inclusive economy, right? Because a lot of the NFT-based metaverses, there's a really, really high barrier of getting into acquiring land. And it could be kind of like in the thousands and tens of thousands of US dollars equivalent to actually get in. Whereas in Upland, the economy is much more diverse and much more inclusive. So there are some very expensive land parcels that you can buy. So if I really wanted to own a big property in Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, yeah, it will cost me a lot of money. But if I don't have the access to this type of funds, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to start out in a starter city such as Fresno, California, or Birmingham, UK, and actually have the same experience, same kind of like community opportunities, same entrepreneurial opportunities, but with a less market conceived desirable land. And we feel like, again, this mimics better like how real economies operate. There's no reason to create economies that are gated, right? You want to probably expand your offering and make it available to as many players as possible. The same approach we take with any type of asset that we have in the game. So if we take cars, for example, so up until now, we have developed cars under our own native brand, which is called MV Motors. But pretty soon, we're going to have the first real-world cars enter into Upland with our partnership with the Stock Car Pro Series. So now you have branded racing cars, which look phenomenal, and they are very high performance, and they're probably their perceived value will be very, very high in terms of monetary value. But nothing stops me as an entrepreneur to go into Upland, create a factory, design my own car, build it, manufacture it, right? Give it my own brand. And now you can imagine that this type of car may have a bit of a lesser perceived value, but it's going to be much more accessible for anybody who still wants to get into transportation, racing, cargo hauling, etc. So again, the key element here is about maintaining an inclusive economy that can be appealing to a mass market. And then some of our secret sauce, which I think probably I've covered a bit, the real world mapping, the broad appeal, the curated economy. Again, we are designing an economy that is not top down. Upland has never done an ICO or any of that sort. We release new types of land and cities as the game grows, as the economy grows, and as new brand partnerships, local brand partnerships are being established. But we kind of like take upon ourselves the careful curation of the economy in terms of managing supply and demand and other macroeconomic parameters. In the future, we hope to delegate that responsibility to an independent third party, but that can happen when the economy is probably big and robust enough. And then again, one of our probably best and biggest secret sauce is our phenomenal community. So Upland today is one of the biggest and most positive and most active and engaged Web3 communities. Literally, I think like one small anecdote is, going almost 5 years back when we started this thing, when Upland was nothing more than a pitch deck and an idea. The first person we recruited to Upland was a community manager. And we knew that kind of like the magic of and the concepts of Web3, true ownership and open economies, they come from basically a thriving community. Without a thriving community, none of this could actually work. And there's a constant feedback loop here, because the engaged community gets a lot of value proposition from the open nature and the true ownership elements of the platform, which then creates a bigger community, which then creates more opportunities, etc. So again, one of the biggest success stories, I think, for Upland up until now was the ability to establish this phenomenal community around the ecosystem. And again, some of numbers for Upland's economy. So these are a bit dated matrix, but through 2023, our numbers have been very, very stable with maybe a slight growth movement. So we're talking about 145,000 monthly active humans, about 30. Again, today it fluctuates between 30 to 50 average daily active users. And then we have about the USD equivalent of $1 million of secondary market transactions happening in Upland through the economy. Another cool thing is that I mentioned the word MetaVentures before. So MetaVentures, this is our terminology in Upland for player-run businesses. So it can be factories and showrooms, and it can be shops where you trade things. It could be speedways when you kind of like design your own racetrack and allow other players to race on your racetrack. And this is one of the highest growing economic initiative in Upland. So it's still kind of, most of it is still in beta, but we're seeing huge growth in both the amount of businesses that are being introduced to Upland, and then also the economic activity that runs behind it. And then I think finally, again, we are big proponents and big embracers and also active initiators in the open metaverse ecosystem. So again, first of all, Upland is an open ecosystem on its own. We're now actually starting to also allow players to take their assets and, if they want to, export them out of Upland into places like Ethereum and OpenSea, etc. We co-founded and are currently chairing OMA3, which is the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3. It's a standard association that now includes over 1,000 Web3 companies and also non-Web3 companies, with a mission to create standards for the open metaverse. We just initiated the Species Foundation, species.io. It's an initiative to basically take all living creatures and map them into digital assets to create a unified repository that then can be adopted by any game or virtual world in the future, which also allows for then interoperability of these assets. My co-founder Dirk has published a book called Navigating the Metaverse. We run different podcasts, and also obviously we are the Metaverse ambassador for the GBBC. So again, and this is not, I just want to say, this is not done for marketing or PR. We are true believers that the future of the metaverse, again, the metaverse will exist, right? It doesn't matter that whatever, it was more hyped in last year than this year, right? So the metaverse, as envisioned in science fiction, in things like Snow Crash and in other, in Ready Player One and Ready Player Me, sorry, Ready Player One. So this will exist. That vision will exist. It may take years and decades to get there, but we know where it's going. And one of the things that we want to make sure that we are active about developing that prospect is that the most interesting parts of the metaverse in the future, that they are going to be open. They're not going to be owned by any company, but they're actually going to be owned. Each user is going to own their own assets, their own data, their own social connections, etc. And it's going to be open and interoperable. And this is the best way to create a good future for the metaverse. Again, we're not delusional into thinking that there are not going to be some parts of the metaverse that are closed and, and not based on true ownership. But we want to make sure that the most interesting and the parts of it that have the most value proposition are going to be the open ones, and this is why the open parts of the metaverse will eventually win. And maybe the very last thing is, again, we kind of like take sustainability and positive contribution to the world very, very seriously. We have a lot of interesting and these are partnerships that don't they may not make all business sense, but I think they are a good cause and they're supportive. So our partnerships with elements like UNICEF, Susan G. Komen, St. Jude's Hospital, our support with the war in Ukraine. By the way, most of a lot of people in our team are from Ukraine, so we've done a lot of fundraisers and activity around that. And also we Upland uses the EOS mainnet as the blockchain that supports the kind of like the true ownership layer of the offering. And every year we actually contribute to offset the carbon, the negative carbon effects that the chain has on the world through kind of like carbon negative contributions. So again, a big part of what we do is actually trying to, at the very least, decrease the damage that we contribute to the world, but maybe also have some more positive contributions altogether. So I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you anybody who made it this far. Thanks for sticking around, and I'm happy to hear from you guys and girls.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Idan. We really appreciate you sharing your insights like you just did about the future of the metaverse, what it looks like for really humanity and the infrastructure behind that, and the pioneers who are making it happen, like you. So we have a few questions, and the first thing I would like to touch upon would be, we're human beings, and what is your vision for the metaverse, and how do you see it shaping the future of human interaction, how we collaborate? And you mentioned examples of economic activities, commercial activities, and a range of activities, but as on a more human person-to-person level, what are your thoughts? Like, what effects could this have?
Absolutely. And again, all I need to do is, and again, I think I mentioned it, is look at my kids. So I have a 17 and 12 years old. And they live a very again, I don't know if that's the commonality, but they live a healthy social life. They have friend circles. They do a lot of activities in the real world. But oftentimes, when they are at home, they would connect with their friends through these virtual worlds. So my 12-year-old uses Roblox. My 70-year-old, I'm not sure I want to know what he's using, but it's probably things that are a bit more kind of like adult teen oriented. But that's the way that they conduct their social activities when they are home, when it's nighttime, when it's not kind of like doable to meet in the real world. And when you look at that, just imagine these young folks, they're going to grow up, and when they're in the 20s and in their 30s, immersion is going to be within their DNA. And this, I think, is going to be a part of the way of how interaction is done. And then that is going to be the foundation, right? Your social connections, your interactions, this is going to be your base layers. But then on top of that, there's going to be a lot of economic activity, right? So you imagine advertisers who used to maybe advertise on Facebook and Instagram, now they're going to need to figure out, okay, those people are now spending their free time in these worlds. We need to figure out how to engage with them in these worlds, right? And because we hope and we're working towards the fact that everything is going to be open and truly owned, it's no longer going to be about, feeding you nonstop advertisements and then kind of like, so I like to say, like in Web 2, your identity is a couch potato. You're sitting there and you're being bombarded with information. In kind of like Web 3 and the immersive web, right? Your identity is active. It has a state. It has a stateful existence. It's somewhere. It's doing something. It has a group of people around it. It has a home. It has a community, right? So you're always active. And this is actually an opportunity for brands to not just think about how do I shove, ads in their faces. It's about how do I interact? How do I give them an opportunity to create value from themselves? And it could be entertainment value. It could be financial value by actually leveraging the brand and the concept to the community's advantage. So I think there's going to be a big shift in the way we think about those types of interactions and how that translates to economic activity. But what we are absolutely, very, very kind of like fixated on is making sure that these opportunities become open, that they are not owned by any single company. And then that people, when they own their things in the digital world, it's going to be like in the real world. They're going to truly own it, right? It's going to be theirs to decide what to do with, how to realize it. And then that kind of creates a fertile ground for entrepreneurship. And now you're going to see all these young people grow up and become mini entrepreneurs in their own fields, not just in the real world, but also in the digital world.
That is so interesting, Idan, that you bring that up, as companies across industries are going to come up with a strategy for their presence in the metaverse, given that more interactive approach to customers. And in some way, do you think that resembles like when digitization happened at the beginning of the internet? Companies had to figure out their website for their strategy. Everybody had to have a website. And that was the transition to Web 0 and then Web 2 and then across to Web 3. And we're seeing a much more interactive approach. That being said, if you have any thoughts on that, please.
I do, because I think you hit the nail on the head. And the problem, though, is a lot of companies and brands, they are not necessarily well versed in what this means. And oftentimes the outcome is, hey, I'm going to build this so-called experience in one platform or another. And it may be, and again, there are different platforms that allow you to do that, right? And they think, okay, this is kind of like, if I build it, they will come, right? It's kind of like this field of dreams type of, and then they oftentimes, again, they get disappointed because they build this experience, but then nobody comes there and there's no interaction. And there's no real reason why people would go there. And I think that's where some get it wrong. It's not necessarily about building experiences. It's about figuring ways to delight your user base, your fan base, and maybe also to reach to new user community bases by offering them some kind of value. You have to give value to the community so they get excited about the brand or the offering. And now it starts that cycle, right, of like feeding loops between the brand and between the community that actually make it go. And this is much harder. It's probably a slower process, requires a lot of thinking and a lot of innovation. But that's the real way that brands are going to be able to create value, as opposed to, you know, just building experiences and hoping that somebody will come and kind of like consume them.
It's really giving agency at the individual level to the participants. And that being said, I think that's something that the metaverse infrastructure has to really, really take into account. The super app, like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of different players with a lot of different interests, and from a technical level, coming from a lot of different systems. What is Upland's approach to interoperability in the metaverse in order to get everyone to work together? And how does Upland enable that kind of seamless experiences across platforms?
Yeah, so great question. And I think like it starts from not just having a seat at the table, but actually building the tables where people sit. So one example would be OMA 3 and the Species Foundation. So we're actually, every day we're thinking about how the future of interoperability may look like. Like when you think about things, people really like to say the word interoperability very loosely, right? So everybody thinks, hey, you know what? What if I can take my car and just move it from Upland to Sandbox, right? Amazing. Well, guess what? Technologically speaking, it's very easy, right? But how can you take a car in Upland if it looks like Upland? We use kind of like more like a realistic art style. You put it in Sandbox, and Sandbox is a voxel-based world. Suddenly, it's out of place. So what's interoperable about that? Why would Sandbox want to show a car asset that is not voxel? So interoperability is not just about technically taking the assets and transferring them. Like NFT technology basically almost solved that problem, right? But it's beyond that. And this is part of the reason why, for example, we started out with a species initiative, because now you're thinking about ways to actually create unified repository that are actually meant to notarize all the standards. So we take a life form so let's say take a cow, right? So how much energy does it need to kind of like to nurture until it's fully grown? How much energy does it consume in terms of food, right? Does it output milk? How much, right? How fast does it run? What are the color patterns? How does it breed? All of these data are in a centralized repository, but then that also contains different ways for it to manifest itself, either voxel style, real world style, photorealistic style, 2D, 3D, doesn't matter. But everything ties to that same logical entity. And now you can start imagining interoperability, because if Upland, for example, adopts species, which it will, to implement life in Upland, then any other platform that relies on that standard would be able to actually be interoperable with any other platform that relies on the same standard. So now you're starting to think about and talk about real interoperability, and not just one that technically takes the assets from one place to another.
Yes. And you also mentioned that Upland is a very inclusive marketplace of users. Can you speak more to how you've developed an approach to tackling challenges of accessibility or affordability for some users to participate in the metaverse? You gave the example of Brazil. How are you doing that across the board?
Yeah, so I think like one thing that goes to our advantage is, again, the mapping to the real world, which sounds trivial, but it's a very important element in the toolshed, because immediately you can understand why a property in Fresno, California is worth less than a property in the prime areas of San Francisco, right? It's like in the real world, right? There are actually lots of differences. And then you go further to Brazil, right? Rio de Janeiro, in the center of the city, again, maybe pretty expensive, but as you go to the outskirts, right, you get less and less valuable property. And it's not us that need to make that. It's actually perception that basically dictates then the differences in prices. And we take that same approach, not just with properties, but with all our asset classes, right? And part of the important thing here is not to rely just on us to provide the content. Once we open it to user-generated content, once we allow anybody to design and create, let's say, cars and racing carts and, you know, map items and wearables, right? Now, naturally, there will evolve a gradient of basically price structures, right? If we have a deal with Ferrari at some point, and Ferrari builds cars in Upland, you can imagine that's going to be very, very, very expensive. Whereas someone who has an or their own brand of cars that they design on their own and they're selling it, right? It could be much more accessible. And again, I think like at the end of the day, like we always try to draw inspiration from the real world. And in the real world, this is how it goes. If I want to buy a pair of jeans, I can buy Amazon Basics and it will cost me X, and I can buy whatever, Levi's or whatever I don't know if anybody buys Levi's anymore, and it will cost you Y, right? So the same concepts we will happen in Upland. And by the way, not because we design it that way, it's just because when you have everything open, like the natural economic basically effects will take place, and naturally it will resemble the real world because that's the way humans think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And someone also asked about the role of privacy and data security. Sometimes there's questions even with regard to the privacy regulations that would apply when you have people from different jurisdictions, or just from a practical level, how do you ensure that level of security for users?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, number one thing is that we don't take and don't store any personal information. We're not interested in that. So you don't give your real name, you don't give your address. Like we don't need that, right? But then that's where the blockchain element shines, because in security terms, like you can't hack Upland even if you wanted to. So you can maybe hack our servers, right? Like anybody that runs any types of servers has the risk of being hacked. But even if Upland is hacked, everybody, all of our consumers' assets are safe because they truly own them. So you would have to hack each and every one of their private keys, which we don't have exposure to, to have access to their assets. So I think that's actually one place where blockchain shines. There are some side effects that I think are very positive in terms of transparency, but the downside of them is transparency, meaning that everybody can see all of your activity. Now, the key point, though, is that activity ties to your Upland identity and not to your real world identity. So that's where, and even when people, again, to maintain regulatory compliance, when Uplanders want to realize value, they need to go through a KYC process. But that process is not done by us. It's done by a third party, and we never hold any of that information, right? So at the end of the day, I call it like your virtual identity in the metaverse is exposed, but your real world identity is not exposed unless you want it exposed, if you go in the community or if you make yourself public, etc.
There's a very clear underlying current of digital identity. Would love to hear you speak more to the importance of maybe it's a model of self-sovereign identity and potential challenges that it could imply.
Yeah, that's one of the $1 million questions that are also kind of like occupying our minds at OMA 3. It's about, again, we see in the future, you shouldn't have multiple identities in each platform, right? I think the ideal future is that you have your digital identity, or you may have multiple identities that you own, and then you can use them in between different worlds and different platforms and different, it could be different services. It doesn't have to be even, games or just virtual worlds. So it's a stretch, to be honest. I think one of the difficulties is that a lot of worlds rely on that identity as either a source of income or a source that defines what they are. We took a bit of a different approach in Upland. So we just, in Upland, your identity is actually what we call your block explorer. It's kind of like your game piece that roams the world. But we recently introduced 3D avatars. So when you go into homes, when you go into spaces, you kind of like, you can wear 3D form. And this could be one part of your identity. Basically, it's 3D projection in the world. But we actually want to keep it open. We are optimizing for a future where you'll be able to take any of the identity, or any of your 3D identities that you use in other worlds. We want you to be able to import them and connect them to your Upland, and then you can choose which one you want to use. So we don't think anybody should own how you look in the metaverse. This is something that needs to be user-centric and not kind of like company or platform-centric, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The next question would be, you recently introduced STEM. If you could provide further details about this implementation strategy with respect to anticipated timeline, use cases, STEM's replication? What is it, and where do you think it'll go?
So thanks for the Uplander that posted this question. I just don't think we have enough time to go into that. I think we have like 5 minutes. I do, though, really encourage everybody to, if they can, come to, we have our Genesis Week in Las Vegas next Friday, June 9th. This is our yearly celebration of the minting of the first property in Upland. And we've now done it. This is the second year it's going to be done in person in Las Vegas. So if you can come to Vegas, come, and we're happy to have the entire team engage in conversations about that, and we'll also present and talk about it. And if you can't, please kind of like log in online and see all that content. One of the things we're going to talk about is basically STEM Totem, the kind of like the Totem project that we're launching with kind of like, it's kind of like, so just to give a bit of background what people are speaking about, we are starting to get ready to the point where we introduce life into Upland. So up until now, Upland has been an inanimate place, virtual world, right? Only, we have properties and structures and cars and decor and wearables. Everything is like, doesn't have life into it. But we always wanted to introduce life into Upland. And in the coming weeks, we're going to take the first steps into kind of like going there. Some of it is about kind of like a new token that is going to be launched that is going to be used to sustain life in Upland. And then the other is going to be cool NFTs that are meant to simulate the mechanics of how players would interact in the future with life. So kind of like, what is the optimal way you want to cultivate them? How do they pay back? If the metaphor is, if you're growing a fruit tree or you're raising a cow, at some time it should give you resources back for the resources you put in. So this is some of the things we're starting to simulate and study kind of like in terms of mechanics to kind of like, craft our path forward.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, is there a relationship also with the function of World of Football? There was a comment on that, if you'd like to expand on any of it. Otherwise, we'll move quickly to, we have a lot of...
World of Football is one of our third-party developers. They actually now recently introduced a new player to earn mode, so you can actually now go and play against other people, and you can wage Apex. So you can actually put your Apex into play, and if you win, you take Apex. If you lose, you lose your Apex. So again, with World of Football, we are hoping to have some really cool tournaments around the time that the FIFA Women's World Cup takes place as well. So again, this is one example of a roadmap which we as Upland don't have control over, but we try to support our developers and give them whatever they need to create fun experiences for Upland. So for us, anything that grows the ecosystem, anything that creates engagement is a huge plus.
Yeah, talking about engagement, creating experiences over the metaverse, and also in light of inclusion, there's been a question on spiritual, religious organizations, and in the context of allowing people to connect with each other on a more deep basis. Could you speak to that?
It's a fantastic question, and I think again it's another place where virtual communities will and we call it virtual locality. So virtual local communities, I think, will thrive because it's going to be easy for you to find, or easier for you to find, kind of like like-minded individuals, even though they're not physically next to you in the world. But again, I don't know if you anybody that had the experience of doing, like, look at the meeting we're doing now, right? Where we see each other's videos, right? But we are in 2D. When you are conducting those types of meetings in immersive spaces, you suddenly realize that you are doing some actions that are very intuitive. You actually your brain starts to make you think that you are in an actual space. So things like if our avatars would be like this, and suddenly somebody would come in between us, immediately, instinctively, both of us will skid a bit just so we can still see each other, and you catch yourself doing it instinctively. But it's kind of like it comes natural, and this is why I think those types of connections will kind of like prosper in the future. And how does that relate at the end of the day to more deep connections? I think again, it's going to be that trolling will become harder, I think, right? Because people who own these places. So for example, we're introducing now cafes into Upland. Players would be able to own cafes. These are points where people can immerse in 3D and connect with each other, share streaming, talk in spatial audio, right? But the owners of these cafes are the moderators for once. So, again, it's up to the owner to actually create a safe ecosystem and a valuable in a content manner ecosystem. And then the other things, there are now opportunities to gate these experiences with resources, right? So maybe you charge subscription services from anybody who wants to interact, or maybe you gate it with a desirable NFT that you created for your community, and only people who own these NFTs can come in. So what does this make? This makes trolling a lot harder to happen. So I think by creating safer and smaller community ecosystems, then that allows you to go deeper, I think, for what interests you, be it religious elements or scientific elements or whatever the topic or the common interests are. I think it is going to serve to create safer and better spaces for people to interact with.
That is fascinating. We are out of time, unfortunately, and thank you, Idan and Upland, for joining us today. It was a very thoughtful and engaging presentation and Q&A on the metaverse, the super apps to power it, and what it could mean for humanity moving forward. We look forward to learning more about Upland's progress. A recording of this presentation will be circulated to all those who registered and shared publicly on GBBC's YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
All right, thanks, Diana.